everybody. Welcome to Coffee Time Q&A. We are back for Season 2, Episode 1. I guess
because we couldn't remember what episode we
had no clue how many we did in the first season, right?
I don't know, but I know that the listeners are going to be in for a treat because this could go anywhere. Mm-hmm. We are drinking some coffee. Let's start with that. Mm-hmm. We are drinking some coffee. Adam, where we get this coffee?
Ooh, this is Gatamboya. Am I saying that right now?
I don't know.
Gatamboya. PB. And it's got some raspberry jam, Concord grape, and savory. I love how it's washed. The coffee has been washed. That's good. I think that's a good. I bet Folgers don't get washed. Do you think?
Well,
and then we have that we know it's good coffee because it's at an 1,800 feet elevation, yards. I don't know, 1,800.
Probably meters.
From
it's
meters.
Not the United States.
Yeah.
It's from Kenya.
I don't know. It says it's 3 ships. No, you kidding. Karatina, Naira.
I'm not sure this was a good idea.
Kenya.
I did this so it would be comical seeing him do this. Single origin, Kenyan. Subtle notes of all the grapes.
I bet it's amazing.
But it's very subtle. The notes are very subtle.
Because I haven't had good coffee since season 1.
Cheers, mates.
Cheers.
We're bringing back the loud sip thing. That's cool.
Oh, that's good.
I don't know if Adam ever let go. It is delicious.
It is very good.
Oh my
You
goodness.
forgot what real coffee tastes like, didn't you?
I wish I had a full mug.
I might have taken too much. I might have taken more than my fair share.
Brew another pot.
Might have taken more of my fair share for sure. Well, we told, at least my first Sunday back from sabbatical, we told the church that we were going to do an episode on sabbaticals in general. And if they had any questions about anything specific to my sabbatical, that I would field those and we kind of talk about my experience. But before we talk about my experience in the sabbatical and your guys' experience with me gone, still leading and carrying on ministry at the church, let's just talk about sabbaticals in general. Biblical, non-biblical, good idea, bad idea. What do you think?
I think it's a good idea. Although we were talking about baseball just a little bit here in the room, and my favorite baseball player, of course, is Cal Ripken Jr., the Iron Man who never missed a day. So I asked Cal Ripken and what he thought. I was kidding.
The pastor should never take a day off.
No, you don't take a day off. No, even if you're injured, don't matter. You get out there. No, I think they certainly. There's a lot of benefit, I think, to a sabbatical. I think we see periods of rest in the Bible, certainly with years of Jubilee, different reasons that the land rested, people rested. We see that in the week. We see Sunday or on the seventh day. On the seventh day, God rested. So I think there is biblical principles that are being followed when we have a sabbatical. I think it's a good idea. I think it's healthy. I think for a pastor to be able to have that time, because I mean, when you're in it year after year after year, week after week after week, preaching sermon after sermon, I think it's definitely well needed, well deserved, and can be used in many good ways.
Yeah, and I think anyone involved in ministry has felt the need for some type of break, but especially people in a pastoral position, where the job that you're involved in isn't just physically taxing, but it's also mentally and spiritually taxing as well. And it's really hard to find that time to be refreshed and actually spend quality time with your family. And super, super useful, for someone to continue to actually be able to serve the church well and therefore serve the Lord well if they're not taking the time to refresh themselves.
Yeah, what you mentioned about the mental rest, I know I was going to wait to talk more about personally, but that for me was the greatest benefit of the whole thing, is recognizing that I've worked a lot of physical jobs before I was in ministry. Enlisted in the military. I'd done concrete construction at one point, did restaurant work where you're on your feet all the time. I've done a lot of jobs where you're just physically tired at the end of the day. You work 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. You're physically tired. You go home, you take a shower, you eat a hot meal, you rest, and you're ready back at it the next day. Generally, re-energized. But mentally, to prepare a sermon every week, and sometimes it's even extended because you're teaching Bible studies. You might be leading a small group. You might have other gatherings in which you're speaking at and other events. And so there was a period where I was teaching like 3 times a week at a minimum for a lengthy period of time at my previous church. And so you'd compound that over years. And the cumulative effect on that is just mental exhaustion that's hard to recover from without an extended period of rest. And so for me, by far, mental exhaustion is different, and you can't recover from it overnight. Mm-hmm. And that was definitely the greatest benefit for me.
Yeah. And when you think about that, just mentally, all of the effort that goes into that, when you're physically tired, sometimes you just push through, but mentally, when you're trying and you just don't feel like you're 100%, I think what you're doing can suffer because you're just not able to give your best.
Yeah, you're in like big risk of just shutting down entirely and like removing yourself from like relationships, and like you just completely separate yourself.
Yeah. And let's not lose sight of the weight that a lot of pastors carry.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm not talking physical weight. I'm talking about the weight of responsibility
right.
that you can feel, in terms of spiritual oversight of someone. Then the Bible says we're going to give an account for those that we have oversight over. And so that can weigh on you in such a way that if you don't tend carefully to yourself and you're not spiritually charged, you're not, in a good place mentally, spiritually, it can easily lead to burnout. And you just think of, I saw stats, some old statistics, but within a decade, some research came out that said somewhere around at that time, I think it was around 2013, 2014, it was something like 1,700 pastors leave the ministry every month. Now, I'm sure there's a ton of different factors with that, but that's a large number.
Yeah.
And the top 3 reasons cited are burnout, depression, and something around their anxiety. And I think that, or being overworked.
Yeah.
And so you couple that with the fact that somewhere around 50% of pastors reported that they felt they could not meet the demands of their job. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. And I think you can, you can see how that can happen. I think that one reason may be is that so many churches, I think, place too much responsibility on the lead pastor and do not train their elders and deacons well enough to carry out
if they even have elders and
if
deacons.
they have it, right. So especially a smaller church, but I think in that we see the importance of bringing people around a lead pastor, other elders, shepherds, deacons who are able to carry out ministry so that so much of it doesn't fall on the lead pastor.
Yeah. So the biblical model
plurality of elders
is the biblical model for a reason. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're to carry one another's burdens for sure. Some of the advice, I reached out to a lot of different folks. I'd never taken a sabbatical before. Water's Edge had a policy for me to have a 2-month sabbatical once every 7 years in my 7th year, each 7th year that I come upon. And we delayed that for a year because of the pandemic, and I was on active duty with the military, so I actually took it in my 8th year. Mm-hmm. So I had 7.5 years of full-time ministry at Water's Edge, plus 5 at my previous church in which I didn't take a sabbatical, never more than a week-long vacation, I think, at a time. So you're talking a dozen years there without that sort of accumulation of mental exhaustion. But I reached out to a lot of folks like, how do I do this? How do you plan a sabbatical? What do you do? Is it just like a big vacation? Is it just like this spiritual hermit? Should I go to a convent? I mean, that was actually a thought that I had, to go spend some time at a monastery, and live with some monks for a while to observe their way of life and, be silent for a period of time. And I got all kinds of different advice, but one of them was more about how to take care of the church, or what to do while you're gone, because it places a lot of weight on the church if you take the primary speaker out for an extended period of time. And so I wanted to put it on you guys. What was it like with me being gone for 2 months? You probably carried a lot more of the weight than normally, so the bulk of it probably fell on you and the elders. But still, it would have been different for everybody in some way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was good being able to plan ahead and know that it was coming. I mean, just with you having been activated by the military previously, so it was good, and having to leave before, it was good to be able to plan that. But for me, I was blessed by the work that had been done previously. I mean, and when I say that, I mean just the way that the elders have been trained, the way that we've been able to function as a group. The deacons who a fantastic job with all of their ministry, the way that they carry out each individual part of the ministry. So for me, I think it was beautiful just to see everybody is able to capably do the things that they need to do, so that more didn't fall on me than needed to. So as the church, we walked through the book of Ruth, which was good. I felt it was a good thing for the church.
Awesome.
We certainly saw the hand of providence, I think, just in the period of time that we were in the church, and community groups. I mean, everything I felt like ran smoothly, and it was really a testament to just the capability of all the other church leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a not that much more outside perspective, but like a little bit more, it was super encouraging. Like, obviously we all missed Steve. Like, he's a cool dude. We like having him around. He's all right, as the kids would say. But to know that the church prospers not based on any man, but rather on the providence of the Lord. And like you said, Adam, like knowing the sabbatical was coming up and being able to prepare and get everyone's like minds in the right place, their hearts in the right place. Like, we didn't skip a beat. Like, I learned so much from the book of Ruth. Like, it was awesome. And worship was still amazing, and new people were still coming into the church and sticking around during that time period, which is always what you want. So, like, to see that continue. And by saying all this, I just mean like everything went according to the mission of the church that we pulled from Scripture, which was to be most passionate about what's most important. Like,
make disciples. Yeah.
Make disciples. Like, the mission didn't change because one person left.
And that groundwork had been laid over years in advance, 7.5 years, so in that time we've been able to grow into these roles and be able to do that. And I think that's how the church is healthy, and the church is, you mentioned, people come in and I'm like, oh man, they're new and Steve's not here. I've never seen them again. No, but I mean, that was really encouraging. And the congregation, it was really encouraging to me, and I was blessed by it,
Yeah. So in addition to you, we had a lay elder, our chairman, Tim Faber, preached a couple sermons during that time as well. And so it's just to hear you say that no is encouraging to me, because that's what we want. That's what we strive for, is that the church would, I think it's a sad reality that so many churches hinge upon the charismatic, leader, that kind of the visionary person. I'm not saying I am that.
Say, how do you refer to yourself?
But you know what I'm talking about. It's like there's so many churches that if you take that person out, it kind of collapses and falls apart. And that's a sad thing, So if anything, it's a testament to the health of a church to be able to maneuver in that way. Super encouraging in so many ways. What do you think was the most difficult part of that, before I move into more of like my specific experience?
I've got a good answer for that one. Steve and I talk a good amount about everything, and I think for me personally, and I think I've got some like ideas of what it might have been difficult for the church as well. But like for me personally, like I knew that Steve was taking a break from ministry. And so to come to him for advice for things like spiritually, personally, whatever, felt kind of weird. Not necessarily in a bad way, because like he needed the break. That's why he was doing this. And obviously we've established in this conversation that what he did was much needed. But yeah, that was kind of weird. And kind of difficult to tread on, like, what can I approach Steve about? What can I talk to Steve about? Like, what can I text Steve about?
Right.
Whether casually or super, I mean, we still met and talked about like some important stuff, but
I think we can say Noah got engaged while I was on Sabbatical.
Oh yeah, I'm stoked. I'm getting super married. It's going to be awesome.
I think that's public now.
It is, yeah. Aaron and I are stoked.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. But what he's saying was true for you guys as well, I think, on some level.
Yeah. And
the elders, because the elders, I think,
especially
struggled with what to contact me about.
Sure, because we'd be, and I think we, as the elders, I mean, we didn't want anything to sit and wait. We wanted to be able to, do what we would normally do and carry out, the business and the shepherding of the church. And I felt like we were, but what I was thinking about was just, in seeing you at softball games and different things like that, it's like, it's just interesting to not talk about church. It's just funny, but yeah, I mean but I know that was much needed and healthy. And, for me, I mean, it's really, having to, preach that much is just not something that I'm used to. So for me personally, that was the most difficult part.
Some good reps.
I had good reps, and then continuing just with the youth ministry as well too. Thinking back, probably should have delegated a little bit more in that area, but it's good,
for sure.
Good experience.
Yeah. So my sabbatical was amazing in so many ways and challenging in so many other ways, and some for the reasons that you say. Of like here in Virginia Beach, the church, I have a lot of very close relationships in the church, as I should, and I think some pastors take a different stance on some of that, but that is not me at all. And so that was kind of difficult too, of knowing the boundaries there and like how do we hang out and not talk about church and stuff like that. But it came at a time where I had just completed a year and a half of active duty, plus a lot of leadership challenges that we faced during the pandemic of pastoring the church during that season. I was also working on my doctorate at the time. And so like all of this stuff came to a head right when I left active duty at the September 30th, and I started the very next day my sabbatical. And so I went from having 2 full-time jobs and all of this writing and reading I was doing, research for my ministry project for my doctorate, to pretty much nothing. And I still had my first month, I still had to complete some things for my degree. I had to do my oral defense. A lot of people will write on their sabbaticals. So not all sabbaticals are taken for the purpose of just rest. Like some pastors will write if they take an extended one, or that's more common in the academic world, like professors and get sabbatical policies so they can write and do research and further their academic career. But for me, it just came at the right time, and so that was really important. The first month went mostly according to plan, meaning we had some trips planned. We went to Florida, got to surf in Cocoa Beach, which was super rad because it was right after a hurricane, and so there was actually some pretty good, like, chest-high waves and a lot of fun.
Yeah, he sent me pictures. Yeah. It was super fun to look at this.
It was pretty flat here at the time. And then we went to Disney, never taken the kids to Disney. We realized we're not a Disney family at all, but it still was,
it's a good experience.
Once a good one-time experience for us. I went on a major hike. That was probably for me the most fulfilling part of my sabbatical, physically sort of exhilarating, and spending that time with one of my best friends, Elliot. We did the Virginia Triple Crown. We hiked a 40-mile loop and some of the most breathtaking views that you can imagine on the Appalachian Trail, the kind of iconic shot at McAfee Knob. And then we hiked along Tinker Cliffs and Dragon's Tooth, and it was amazing in so many ways. Physically challenging, for sure. We hammocked, and so we tried to do ultralight, only carry about 25 pounds in the pack. But when you're doing, 13 to 15 miles a day, and you're not in your 20s anymore, it can be pretty brutal.
25 pounds gets heavy.
It does.
After mile 30.
Even when you're in your 20s.
Yeah, for real.
So that was a part of the first month.
This is Rodney. And I just want to let you all know, he was sending me pictures the whole time. I was jealous.
Well, I originally wanted Rodney to do it with me a long time ago, and he was like, I got to get in shape to do it. He said, you need to give me some time to work up to it.
Well, yeah, it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah. And I see now, people, you could have got broken off. We actually ran into a Liberty student who was just broken off and
I'm ashamed.
Was so not prepared to be out there, and we ended up having to help him out and take care of him. But that was a great experience. Those were like some of the trips that we did. We did a trip to DC during that month. The idea is that we would have a big family trip. DC and Florida were family trips. I had sort of the individual thing going on with the hike, but I did go with my best friend for safety reasons and for spiritual edification. And then we had a trip for just Lisa and I planned in November, and that's when things changed because at the end of October we realized that my son had some health conditions going on, and we took him to the hospital the last day of October on Halloween. And he was in the hospital pretty much all through November. So we ended up having to reschedule our trip to Hawaii. Lisa and I were planning on going to Hawaii. She'd never been. We were blessed to be able to have the money to be able to do that and not go in debt. And so we rescheduled that. We rescheduled a trip to Ohio at Thanksgiving time. And that's where I think the Lord did the most work in my heart, though, during that month. And that was where sort of my resolve was tested in terms of what is this sabbatical really? And all along I'd been reading scripture, I'd been studying and tending to my spiritual, self-care in that way. However, it wasn't until we had to go through a trial, and still are, that I really heard from the Lord in ways that were, very impactful in my life. Mm-hmm. And I found myself feeling frustrated and nowhere to point like that frustration or nowhere to direct it. I wasn't frustrated with my son. He had a kidney disorder that had nothing to do with anything that he had done. And, and it was a weird feeling because I felt so selfish for feeling frustrated. And then the Lord just, I think through that month reminded me of his care, his providential leading, and that I was able to be with my son during that time in the hospital and not have to worry about missing work and not have to worry about Sunday morning and, and all these other things that would have had going on otherwise. And I see it now as a blessing to be on sabbatical during that time versus a derailment of our plans.
Yeah.
You know, I think about the proverb. It says, you know, in his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps. And we can make all the plans that we want. Nothing's guaranteed. The next day is not even guaranteed. And so that was an interesting experience to kind of be derailed that way. But at the same time, probably learn the most from that experience. I think it's revealed things in Malachi, you know, beautiful things about his character, his courage during this time. But he's also had to work out his own frustration too. And so it's been a trying time, but a very beneficial time in our family's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it was interesting, and it's weird to come back from sabbatical because I was like so amped up, and I have been the last couple of weeks. Really excited. I did give the church opportunity to ask questions. I got one. I know we're going long. It's been a long time since we've done this, so we can indulge ourselves for a few extra minutes. I had the question written down, but I'll just paraphrase it. I only got one, and the question had to do with my personal time on sabbatical, and you know the question was something like, did I find it more freeing than to not have to study to prepare for a sermon every week, but in terms of exploring more topics and studying things and reading things that out of enjoyment. And absolutely, yes. Yeah. And part of that too is finishing school up. You know, so much of my study outside of sermon prep was schoolwork. And coming to a head with that, I had some specific things I wanted to read and really focus on my prayer life. So I'm reading a book about prayer. I was also reading Richard Baxter's Reformed Pastor during that time. And so to be able to read books that I wanted to read versus had to read was absolutely amazing. But my devotion time looked the same as it always does and always has. I spend roughly a half an hour in the morning praying and reading 3 or 4 chapters of the Bible and then kind of praying at the beginning and end of that. That hasn't changed. But it is very nice. Still is very nice to be able to study things that I want to versus have to all the time.
Did you study dinosaurs?
No, I didn't. No, I had in mind originally some things around that old Earth, young Earth debate that I wanted to look into, and some books I still want to read, but I did not. I did find an article I want to share with you about it. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be
absolutely.
back. It's good for us to be back.
I know. I'm
is.
stoked to be sitting around this table again.
I know.
It's been weird.
Season 2, episode 1. We're out.
Now, gentlemen, that is not how you do an outro. If you have not done so yet, make sure you like, subscribe, and click that bell. That's the only way you're going to know when we put out new videos on YouTube. And if you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, make sure you leave us a review. We do want to know how we're doing. We love you all, and God bless.